Saturday morning, which means I play the didgeridoo on my front porch. But I also like to bake bread on Saturday morning. Come on inside. One of the biggest hang-ups that a lot of people have about breaking bread is that it takes a little bit of time. But this recipe that I'm showing you today is a quick one. In less than an hour you can have a nice loaf of bread or several loaves of bread. This comes out of one of my favorite books called Artisan Bread in 5 minutes a day by Jeff Hertzberg and Zoe François. So we have both French and German represented in this book. I would highly recommend the book. There's all sorts of great recipes in it, but I'm just going to be teaching the very basic recipe today. So I'm actually going to start with this. This I made up almost a week ago. This is a double batch of the basic bread recipe. And the idea behind it is that you can mix up a big bucket of dough and over the course of up to 2 weeks, cut off a chunk of dough, throw it in the oven, and have beautiful artisan bread in just a short period of time. I will say that the title of the book is a little bit misleading. It does take slightly more than 5 minutes, but I really love the idea of being able to take something out of the fridge, form it into a nice round loaf, and pop it in the oven, and 35 minutes later have a beautiful loaf of bread. So I'm going to sprinkle my counter with some flour. This dough is quite moist and sticky, so I'm just going to cut off kind of a generous grapefruit-size piece of dough. And I'm just going to fold this under quickly. Just put a little bit of flour on, fold that under quickly. Shouldn't take more than about 30 seconds to form that. Underneath it's a little bit pinched, but that's going to heal quite nicely as it rises and cooks. Just roll that in the flour and give it a nice dusting. Before I put this on my pizza peel, I'm going to sprinkle this with a heavy dose of cornmeal. That'll allow that to slide off the pizza peel and onto the pizza stone in the oven. So I'm just going to let that rise now for about 10 to 20 minutes, and I'll slide it in the oven. I'm going to turn my oven on right now to 450 degrees. So it's important to warm up your pizza stone about the same time as your oven. Pizza stones can have a thermal shock and crack if you throw a cold stone into a warm oven or a hot oven. You'll also notice that I have my broiler pan here in the bottom. That's going to allow me to pour water into that right when I put the dough in, and the water will immediately start turning into steam and steam the dough and create a really beautiful artisan crust. So while we're waiting for the oven to warm up and the bread to rise just a little bit, I am going to mix up the recipe that will enable you to do this artisan bread in 5 minutes a day. So this is the basic recipe. 3 cups of water. I usually use cold water because if I use warm water, the instant yeast responds to it very quickly, and your bread might overflow the container that you put it in. So to that, I'm going to add 1.5 tablespoons of the sea salt, or any kind of salt, just kind of a coarser salt. Like regular iodized salt is probably not the best, but it can totally be used. So this is actually mined here in Utah, down in Redmond, and I really love the flavor of it, and it has a lot of natural minerals in it. So it's a little bit different color than most typical salts, but use what you got. So to that, we're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of the instant yeast. I use the SAF instant yeast. This is a vacuum packed brick that can store on your shelf for a long time. I just pour that right into a container that I keep in the fridge, and that works out really nicely. So 1.5 tablespoons, and with that half a tablespoon, just kind of eyeball it. Okay, so this is instant yeast, so it doesn't require a long time to activate. It can actually go right in and you can mix it up with your flour. This recipe calls for 6.5 cups of flour. You can go all white if you want, but I like to have a little bit of, I don't know, tooth to my bread. And so I'm gonna add 2 cups of the whole wheat. You can do whole wheat, absolute all 6.5 cups of whole wheat, but that bread is gonna be super dense. This is a red wheat, so it doesn't, it's a little bit different than white wheats and other things that are available. So this is gonna add some tooth and some texture, some flavor that I really love. I would recommend going over 1/3 of the total amount of flour be whole wheat flour. So I'm gonna add 2 cups of whole wheat and 4.5 cups of the all-purpose white. If you have bread flour available, use that, but bread flour right now is a little bit difficult to find. So 6.5 cups of flour. You'll notice I'm using my Bosch mixer. You can do this by hand. It's a lot more work, but I have done it before and it can be done. You can also use a KitchenAid or whatever other mixer, a Hobart or whatever kind of mixer you have. I would recommend that if you have a KitchenAid that you don't try to double this. The reason I have my Bosch is because I didn't necessarily burn out the motor, but I tore off a couple of teeth on the cogs of my KitchenAid trying to double that batch. 13 cups of flour is a lot of flour for a KitchenAid to handle. The Bosch handles it like a champ. It's German engineering. I'll go into that some other time about kind of the pros and cons of each different mixer, but this is ready to go. I'm going to kick this on and let it knead for about 3 minutes. So this has been mixing for probably just over 4 minutes, and it's all mixed up. I'm going to pull the bread hook out of this. This dough, I should say, is really sticky. Because of that, it's recommended that you refrigerate it for at least 5 hours before you try to use it. That will stiffen the dough up a little bit and make it possible for you to work it like I was working it before. I'm going to take this and stick it right into a Tupperware and see how sticky it is. But the moisture content in this will allow it to be used for a long period of time, up to 2 weeks they suggest. And I will say too that the longer you leave this in the fridge, the more it begins to taste a little bit like sourdough, because the wheat and the flour begins to ferment. So you'll get a much different flavor from this bread dough than you after 1 week or 2 weeks than you would after just 5 hours of chilling in the fridge. Okay, so I put this in the container. You can see it's still fairly fluid. I'm going to put the lid on that and put it in my fridge. Again, it needs to rest for at least 5 hours in the fridge. It's important to have an airtight container because the dough will dry out over time if it doesn't have a nice cover on. Okay, so this is ready to go into the oven. It's been waiting for about 20 minutes now. And before I do that, I'm just gonna slice the top and create kind of a fun design. This doesn't need to be cut very deep. The deeper you cut, the more intense it will split open as it cooks, as it bakes. So I just did obviously a real simple design, and I'm going to set that aside for just a minute because I actually have done another one. I know a lot of people may not have pizza peels and pizza stones, but you may have a Dutch oven or some kind of a casserole that you can bake this in. And I'm going to do that right now with this bread that I also cut about the same time and just put that on a piece of parchment paper. I have been using a razor blade. I'm also can just use a sharp serrated knife. And I'm just going to do a real simple design on this one too. Just kind of a section like that. My Dutch oven has been heating up to 450 degrees. So it's nice and hot. I'm going to put that here, drop that in, and put it back in the oven. Okay, this Dutch oven is super hot, 450 degrees, so you don't want to touch it. I'm just going to drop that right down in, and then put this lid back on, put it back in the oven. This other one, because of the cornmeal, I'm going to be able to shake that off really pretty easily right onto the pizza stone. So the pizza stone's also 450 degrees, and I'm going to add a cup of water to the broiler pan down there to get it to steam nicely. So the Dutch oven, one nice thing about the Dutch oven is you don't have to add the extra water, because that'll just kind of steam itself within the confines of that Dutch oven. One of the things I really love about this recipe is that it's so quick. You can keep stuff in the fridge for up to 2 weeks, so I can bake bread throughout the week with really minimal effort and not a lot of cleanup. I also love taking bread to parties, and people know that I love to bake, and so they often, if it's a potluck, they'll say, bring your bread. And I can bake 6 loaves of bread really quickly with really minimal effort. And I can do that and take hot bread to a party. So I can pull it out of the fridge, an hour later I can have 6 beautiful loaves of bread. So think about that. So you can grab this by the paper. Paper's not hot. And I believe that's nice and ready now. A total of 50 minutes was required to get that one to look right. This one has been cooling now for 15 minutes. I'm just going to slice it open and show you what the crumb looks like inside. You can hear that crusty crust. And look how beautiful it is on the inside. Have that with some butter in just a little bit. I love this recipe. It's an easy one. It's one that you can come back to over and over again and not get sick of. And I love the fact that you can pull it out of the fridge, the dough that is out of the fridge, form it into a loaf quickly, pop it in the oven for 35 minutes in this case, or 50 minutes in this case, and have a beautiful loaf of bread to be able to eat and share with your family or share with friends. Thanks for watching. If you like us, subscribe, and please join us for our next bread video. Also, if you have any comments, please post those below, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Bake bread, be happy.